Today we welcome everyone to our Board of Directors agenda meeting for the January 12th, 2021 board meeting, or January 19th, 2021 board meeting that we will be hosting today, next week. This is our opportunity to review the opportunity for the agenda as well as our formal board meeting. We also like to take this time now to recognize directors Hendricks, Richardson, Webb, Peck, Fordson, Director Wyrick's here today. Director, I'm here too. Peck is here today, and Director Richardson's here today. Y'all usually not. Good to see you here today. Y'all usually are on web and not in person. Glad to have you here today. We see on web Director Phillips, Director Webb, and everyone else. We have one modification for today's agenda and appropriation to the Oakland and Fraternal Historic Cemetery Park. So we're making that addition, and our city attorney is passing out an addition to the agenda. Mr. Attorney, would you please explain the addition to the agenda?
One is the targeted neighborhood development initiative.
Could you speak into the mic? Sit down, maybe speak in the mic.
One is the targeted neighborhood development initiative from Director Wright, Director Richardson, and Director Phillips. You have that resolution back, and you have a resolution that shows you some changes in it. The second one is for the e-scooters, and you're getting a packet that has rewrites and notes those changes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Attorney. Any questions from items 1 through 7 on the agenda?
Yeah, Mayor, this Antoine. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, Director Phillips.
I had a question about number 6 on the agenda.
Director Phillips, could you speak into your mics? When you turn away, it's hard to hear you.
Absolutely. I apologize. I have 2 screens up. Shout out to the 2 screens. And I was trying to look at it while I was talking to you guys. But I think item number 6 relates to the $250,000 that goes to the Little Rock Chamber of Commerce. And understand that was part of the budget for 2021. So no concerns about going forward with the approval. I just wanted to know some of the parameters that go along with that. As a new member here, and forgive my ignorance, but do we receive some type of reporting from the chamber on how they're using those funds, 1, and then 2, do we make any specific requests or asks to the chamber in addition to using those funds? I know there are some things that I've heard the city talk about in the past, increasing supplier diversity, doing some more small business development. Do we make those type of asks along with the partnership of the $250,000? So those are my 2 questions on item number 6.
Let me restate the question from Director Phillips in regards to item number 6. First question, do we require and or does the Little Rock Regional Chamber of Commerce report to the City Board of Directors on their activity for their $250,000 consulting services, which is a change from previous years of $300,000? The answer to that question is yes. The Little Rock Regional Chamber of Commerce does do an annual report. At one time it was a quarterly report, but due to NDA agreements they may have with potential projects, certain things on the project scale of things for economic development weren't able to be discussed in a public forum. But there is an annual report. We can request certain things for them to strongly consider as it relates to reporting and what they report to us, as long as it's within the confines of what they can and cannot do if there were to be NDA in place. So to answer your question, they do an annual report. Clearly, Mr. Manager, let me know if you remember this correctly. I believe they were supposed to do one. I know they did one in 2019. They were supposed to do one Q1 of 2020, but we all know the pandemic happened, and I don't think we ever got that scheduled in 2020. So what maybe is be a good refresher, since 2020 was such a challenging year. Mr. Moore is to request that they come during a policy meeting here in the near future. Mr. Moore, and then we'll go to the second question from Director Phillips.
Yes, sir. And actually, Mr. Sire is listening in today, and I think he'll be prepared next Tuesday to speak about activities from 2020 and their focus area for 2021.
So he's already reached out?
I talked to him this morning.
Gotcha. So that's suffice. And so the second question that Director Phillips posed, can the City Board of Directors require certain things? The best answer is that yes, we can request, we can make requests that they will strongly consider. We have made some requests before, and some of that is proven light. For instance, there's been some requests on a stronger focus on diversity, equity, inclusion. And they have been working hard in those efforts and can speak to those efforts, as well as we've asked that they focus on diversifying their workforce, and I know they can speak to that as well. But to answer your question is yes, that we can make encouragement since we do provide dollars to them.
Okay, and that's what, thank you for answering that question, Mr. Mayor and Mr. City Manager. In light of the answer to the second question, I'll put my thinking cap on and then maybe get with the city manager or some of my colleagues on some things that we think should be in the request bag. I understand you don't necessarily get everything you ask for, but I also know if you don't ask, you don't get nothing. And I'm not afraid to ask, especially if we're going to be partners spending the city dollars. So thank you for that. And the other thing I recognize, Mayor, I see Director Hendricks is really waving her hand trying to get somebody's attention. So I'll just say that, then I'll shut up.
Well, thank you so much, Director Phillips. And as Mr. Moore shared, we'll be having Jay Cheshire and his team to come present on what they've done in 2020 at an upcoming policy agenda. That may be an opportunity, give you opportunity between now and the next policy agenda meeting, after our agenda meeting, next policy meeting after our agenda meeting, which will be 2 weeks from now, and to prepare to make those requests during that forum. Now we'll transition to Vice Mayor Hines, then City Director Irma Hendricks, who was waving online, and then City Director Ken Richardson.
Thank you, Mayor. Director Phillips, the other thing too is you should start getting, I want to say I get it quarterly, kind of a roll up from the Chamber on economic development projects. They have them code named and stuff, so you can see some of the activity on prospects they've had in. They're always a little esoteric and but they usually give an industry and what kind of property they're looking for. So if I may have a copy at the house I can bring to you. I think we just got one end of year, but I'll talk with Jay Cheshire at the Chamber, make sure you start getting that publication that they put out as well.
Thank you so much. Actually, kind of take that off your load, Vice Mayor. Mr. Moore, if you'll just send an email note to Jay Cheshire and make sure the entire board's on gets those quarterly reports, please. Director Hendricks, then Director Richardson.
Thank you. I just wanted to remind the board that I initially made a request years ago about the money being paid to the Chamber. And I think that many of you will recall that a former governor's son of the state, along with another gentleman, had filed some complaint. I never did get anything in writing. As far as a report, I've never received a report of what the Chamber is doing. So that's something that I've been concerned about ever since I've been here. We don't know where that money's going, who is helping minorities, the majority. We don't discuss that, and it's time that we start talking about race. So I'm looking forward and requesting the
yes, ma'am. Thank you.
The last report that was received by the city from the Chamber. I've never seen such. I'm finished.
Yes. Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much, Director Hendricks. Director Richardson?
Yes, Mayor. I want to dovetail Director Phillips' question. This has less to do with what the chamber provides us, what we request. I guess my question would be, what mechanism do we have in place to evaluate whether or not we're getting what we're asking for? Do we have any outside independent evaluation that shows us whether or not it's successful or not? So it has less to do with them, whether internally kind of mechanism in place to do evaluation, much like we do at our youth survey programs. So is there anything that we have in place that could evaluate whether or not we were successful, or whether we were able to get what it was we requested or what we were paying or spending money for? And that's the question, Director Phillips.
Thank you so much, Director Richardson. Mr. Moore, but one thing, Director Richardson, what I will say, at least we can account for the last 2 years, I would say, even though we did make a change, budget change and budget reduction from 300,000 to 250,000, I would share that the city has experienced in the last 2 years historic job growth that hasn't been seen in the city of Little Rock over the last 2 years with the 5,000 new jobs. So that would be a good positive report from that standpoint of getting a return on our investment for the 250. Mr. Moore?
Mayor, members of the board, you remember as a result of a lawsuit that was filed, there was a constitutional amendment, I think in 2017, might have been 2016 and enacted 2017, that allowed cities to enter into economic development contracts after going through a request for a proposal process. So the city put out that type of proposal during the fall. And so we asked for certain things in that proposal, and I'll send you all a copy of it. And we only got one response. So the next step is after this board, if the board so chooses to pass this resolution, then anything that Director Phillips or others would want to be sure that's added to the contract, because that's the next step. I will then enter into a contract with the chamber. And Director Richardson, so just like any other organization, they do have to meet the parameters and the standards of the contract. Do we have an independent evaluation? No, we don't have an independent evaluation of our other contracts. But again, we know exactly what we're requesting that for that $250,000. And like the mayor said, there are, if not weekly, almost bi-weekly meetings and contacts with the chamber as far as prospects. And not only prospects, there was a real major emphasis, even with the past chairman, Chairman Bedman, obviously before the pandemic, but to focus on our current businesses, especially with an emphasis on small business. So I would say yes, they are very responsive when we put out our request for proposal, and then also once we agree
to the constitutional amendment you made reference to in 2016. This has, since I've been on the board, been a sole source agreement with the chamber, correct?
It was, I believe you are correct, prior to the lawsuit and amendment.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Seeing no other questions from members of the board. Also, Mr. Wendell, getting some, gotcha, thank you. Any questions from items 8 through 14?
Yes.
Director Wright?
Like a presentation on ordinance 8 and 9.
Yes, Director Collins, if you would come give a presentation number 8 as well as 9.
Mayor, can he stay for 10 and 11 as well?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Make your home.
Okay. Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the board. Item 8 is the annexations labeled, and we label it the Hastings annexation because that is the current owner of the property. It is the property that's become before the board on the zoning, just east of the Woodlands Trail Road, Woodlands Edge tie to Canis, or west of, I'm sorry, west of that tie, just south of the apartment complex at the Cooper Orbit Canis intersection. There's a 40-acre tract right there that previously come for the board for planned development. I'm thinking in that area was about 145 single-family lots to be done in 2 phases. So this is that annexation request to allow that development to have access to city sewer and city services. As part of that, the Cooper Orbit right-of-way would be annexed, and also the to the full extent north of them, and also as it goes down to wherever that adjacent to will annex the full right-of-way of Cooper Orbit where it is in the county, adjacent to us. That is the agreement with the county. It goes to the opposite side of the right-of-way for that annexation.
Okay. Were there any objections to this?
It was placed on the consent agenda. The ones that come out in opposition, there was opposition that come out for the actual zoning of the land for that planned development, but not necessarily for the annexation.
All right, thank you. Number 9, please.
Number 9, if we could
one second, Director Hines, do you have a question on number 8 before he goes number 9?
So, Jamie, part of this deal, this annexation is this kind of paves the way for Cooper, they're reorienting Cooper Orbit into the Panther Branch, correct?
Yes, that is the condition placed on the subdivision portion that went in that was part of that abandonment of Cooper Orbit. But in order to make that happen, Public Works staff, planning staff, and the developer worked on a sequence of how that would happen. Essentially, that north portion or that phase 1, the residential portion that's adjacent to Cooper Orbit, cannot happen without the abandonment of Cooper Orbit. Okay, and that's the extension has to be in place and tied in before that can happen. And so we've been asked multiple times on sequence and timing, and in general, that's the only thing that we could look at from a planning commission and a staff aspect. But we have been working with the county, with the developer, and city staff for the timing of that. And I can tell you that that is in the process for that extension to be made, and because all entities involved wants that to happen.
So the first domino is the extension of Panther Branch, and then
that's correct, because in order for we want that tie to happen, there's drainage issues at Cooper Orbit on that Cobra crossing that's through there, and that was a concern in annexing into the city. That would be part of the city, but that was an agreement to take care of that, and that's why the phase 1 development that needs to be in place before that development is put in.
And 4, thank you.
Director Collins, if you would, move to item number 9.
Item 9, if we could bring up the sketch map for that, that kind of will help explain the development there. Director Wright, I don't know how many of these modifications you've seen with your tenure on the board, but we're at modification letter F for this property. And so this property is several iterations and zonings. The only thing that is existing right now that's been part of the previous plan development is the lots that are sitting adjacent to the street, those northern 5 tracts of land that you see in your exhibit. Those are there, the existing homes that are there. If we could pull up the zoning map, that would kind of show the overall plan development that's been before the board before as far as area goes. Okay, so what you're looking at, if you see those existing homes up there sitting on 40th Street, those are the portions of the plan development that has actually happened. All of the iterations that's come before the board hasn't happened. So right there where it says subject property for PCD revocation, in the past, the last PCD that the board has seen, that is where the educational building and the mosque and that aspect of it was to be located. Mm-hmm. And it was only going to be residential on that PCD area that is to the west, on 40th Street. Mm-hmm. So what they're looking to do is that tract of land that is shown, you see kind of that dividing line where to the right, that is a separate tract of land, separate ownership. What they're looking for this one is more of a scaling back of their overall plan development. And that was that section that the site plan that was up previously. They're still wanting to have the mosque and some other avenues, but if you bring that sketch back up, please. They're looking to do that in that area that they have, which is that tract that's on the west side. You'll look at it, they're looking at the playground area, the mosque, and then an education building. So they are scaling back what they was proposing in the last PCD that this board has seen. So that east portion of it, that's coming forth as a revocation. So they're wanting to revise the PCD to bring it back to this tract, the area, the site plan that you see layout. And then that east portion, it's a revocation request.
Okay. I'm looking here on this sketch and it says on lot 6 playground and 7 mosque. And then you got mosque in the middle.
Yes, ma'am. That's what the label is as presented by the applicant.
So
we can get a little bit more detail on what that is as far as a breakout of the uses of the buildings. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Well, I was just surprised to see 2 buildings labeled mosque. But I mean, I don't understand what they're going to do with it. It could be a fellowship hall. I don't know, So
I'm looking in the description to see if they actually had something wrote up as what the 2 separate buildings are. I do not readily see it. It just says combined seating capacity building is 225, which require placement of the parking spaces. So they are proposing the 2 areas. If you're asking for specific uses in each of the buildings, I can get that request from the applicant and send it to you.
Yeah, you can send it, but I mean, I like the design. I've liked everyone they've submitted. It just,
like I said, this is just a lessening, less intense, trying to bring it back to a smaller footprint for what they're proposing.
Okay, thank you.
All right, seeing no other questions,
I'll tell you,
we'll go to item 10 and 11 for Director Wyrick.
And I have, and 12.
And 12 for Director Peck.
Okay, item 10, if you could bring up the zoning sketch, that'd probably be the best way to explain this.
Jamie, one of the questions as you do your report to us, there's in this application that I'm not familiar with, and it's called a dry pocket with the ABC in Pulaski County.
Yes, ma'am. That is that's a very good question.
So I want you to address that as well, what that means, because that's new to me, and I think it might have ramifications on issues that come before us in the future. So
I have researched and I will be sending out an exhibit. I didn't get one prepared at the time. I did get a call back this afternoon from the attorneys with the ABC to give more explanation of what area they're talking about. Okay. I had called them and requested a map designation of what areas they are talking for what is a dry area within the county. And speaking with the city manager, we will be sending that out. I haven't submitted them for review of that. But what happened is when the county did get voted in to be a wet county, there were areas within the county that were left out of that. Dry, what the ABC is calling dry areas or pockets of the county. It just so happens that they didn't provide me with a map, but they explained to me that the dry area that we're talking about is the Union Township of the tracts of land that was all the surveying, section, township, and range. So the township was Union Township, is what was dry within now our jurisdiction. So the best way to explain it is that township for us inside the city limits is anything south of Baseline Road, in anything east of Geyer Springs Road. That's Union. So whatever limits fall within that, and also the county is a dry section of the county.
But that means something special to us, and that is if they have a restaurant, alcoholic beverages, it has to be approved as a club. It's the way I read the information in here, so can you go over that a little bit?
Yes, I will go over that.
Okay.
What by state law passed recently within the past 3 years, I believe I can get the exact time frame. If there is what the ABC would deem a private club, and it's their definition of a private club, not necessarily the city's definition of a private club, which this would be for them, which is the sale of alcohol within a dry area of the county, then it has to go before the governing body and be acted on by ordinance. So even though C3 zoning, and that's what this property is, allows for restaurant with alcohol sales inside the city limits, the sale of alcohol in ABC is governed by them, and therefore it has to be acted upon by the city board and an ordinance passed.
And it's a different zoning, isn't it, than a restaurant with alcohol sales?
This is where we kind of come to this conversation on this deal, since an ordinance has to be passed by the governing body by their determination of what a private club is for that law. Since it is zone C3, there is no additional ordinance for the city to pass. They didn't pass an ordinance specifically for this property. To do that, we have to present it to the board as a planned development to have action. So it is a requirement of the ABC to have this acted upon on this tract of land. General zoning did not suffice at the ABC when I had the discussion with them 3 years ago.
Okay, so here's the deal. We have a separate zoning for club.
That's correct.
Okay. So it says in the write-up that it has to be approved by the board for a club. So why would we utilize the C3 zoning for restaurant alcohol? Why would we not change the zoning to club as we would approve a club across the city? Why would we not do that?
I do not think that our description of what we approve to allow them to sell alcohol, as long as it's done on an individual property basis. C3 is not done, it covers the tract, but it was not acted for this individual property as an ordinance set for this entity. And so that's what they're asking for. So we could have it labeled differently. They're labeled as a private club. Passing of an ordinance to allow them to have alcohol sales with a restaurant at this location has to be the intent of the ordinance passed.
Am I making sense?
I understand what you're saying. It's like, because we have a different, that's why I say we have a different definition of what we would deem a private club.
But all they want from us is that we approve it as a private club.
That they approve it as allowed to have alcohol sales at this property with the restaurant. And so that's what the requirement is. Their label is a private club is what the ABC labels it, as a private club.
But it's set, we can talk about this later a little bit so I can get a better understanding.
Yeah, we just need it with restaurant and with alcohol sales. Is what the requirement is.
Okay, but we all know that a private club for the city of Little Rock has different ramifications with it than the private club for the state does.
That is correct.
So are we approved, how do we do that? If if they're saying it
We
has
can
to,
make sure it's in the ordinance, and this would be my suggestion. I need to give it to city attorney's office and the city administration. But my suggestion would be that we would say, as private club as defined by the ABC, because that is their definition, not necessarily the city's definition, to allow the sale of alcohol, restaurant with alcohol sales.
I think we need another zoning for the city in situations like this, because this could come up again. And it could be labeled a private club, and they want to operate as a private club. And it's really not a private club for the city of Little Rock. It might be a private club for ABC,
Yes,
but
it might
not
be.
for
I
Little
agree
Rock.
with that, and before today is just for that designation. So I would suggest for revising, if in the verbiage of the ordinance, to make sure it's clearly defined as a private club pursuant to the ABC.
Mr. Attorney, if you would get with Jamie to make that what seems to be a friendly amendment from Director Wyrick.
I don't know if it's friendly or not, but I
Amendment
think it's
Yeah,
something
and I remember
that,
we did have this conversation at the last private club that was brought forth based on the ABC.
we
that is
did
their
have this
difference.
conversation before.
It was when I believe the Cigar Republic come through. Went through, we had this type of same conversation of a difference in definition between the city of Little Rock and the ABC.
I don't recall that. I'm sorry. I'm
Well,
elderly. So.
there is a discrepancy or difference between the two. I wouldn't really call it discrepancy. They just determine a private club differently than what we do.
I would have thought in 3 years we could have figured out how to deal with this if this came up 3 years ago. Okay, go ahead with your report. I'm sorry. That
concludes your report on item 10.
Yeah, the only reason that's before us is because of that aspect. If it was not for the ABC or this dry pocket, which is east of Geyer and south of Baseline, it would be zoned correctly.
So transitioning there.
I would like to hold this separate, please.
Yes, Director Wire wants to hold item number 10 separate. Director Phillips, you had a question on this item, and then we'll go to item number 11.
Yeah, two questions. Thank you, Director Collins, for the presentation. First of which is kind of a request. When you talk with the ABC about the dry pockets, and you may be getting at this, and I just didn't understand your comments correctly. Can we get a list if there are other dry pockets in our city? Maybe they can provide us some type of, dry pocket map throughout the city, so we'll know what those are. And secondly, I understood the write-up to mean, and I think this is what Director Wyrick was getting at, is that I didn't look at it as different definitions. I just looked at it as different labels. So we can call it, as long as we're saying the same thing, whether they call it a private club or we call it C3, we just need to say the same thing to get the ordinance passed. And then the applicant would still need to go to the ABC to get approval to operate after we pass the ordinance. Is that your understanding?
That is correct. They have to get the governing body's approval first, and then it will go before the ABC for their approval, for review.
Okay.
And
all right, that's what I need. And if you can make that request to the ABC, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Director Phillips. Did you have another question, Director Wyrick?
Just to follow up, a concern that I have, if it's approved for a private club based on the ABC's definitions, and we rock along the road here for 3 or 4 years, and somebody wants to open up another establishment at that location, and they say it's a private club, it's already zoned for a private club, and they move in and operate as a private club, how do we deal with that if we have them labeled as a private club?
well, that's why I threw that suggestion out there that we look at that definition as far as the ABC is determine it, but I also throw some of our stuff in there that we're really looking for the use of a restaurant with alcohol sales. And so I think that's something that we can get with city attorney's office, city administration to make sure that verbiage is in there because it is a planned development. So it can stipulate those specific things.
Well, my only issue is, and I'll shut up in a minute, but we've had some locations that had restaurants and alcohol beverages, and they were not zoned for a private club, but they operated as a private club. And it's very difficult to stop that behavior once you get it started. So that's the reason why I've got some concerns about this. And Director Phillips brought up a question for me. It's not because this is a dry pocket that you have to do the private club thing, right? It could be any restaurant and alcoholic beverage that we'd have to prove as a private club.
Thank you so much, Director.
I think she's asking a question.
Oh, is that a question? I thought you were gonna say.
I'd have to go look at that. It depends on what that approval of that development was. Because there is, some private clubs as approved are not restaurants. They are approved differently, typically through a plan development that may not have that restaurant label on them. And the ABC has a different definition of what a restaurant is. It goes by the square footage and typical use. And so if somebody that's just serving like vending machine food is not necessarily a restaurant for them, even though they have a square footage area sitting down. So that's a little bit more of a complicated question with the other private clubs within the city, because they can be a more of a restaurant type or style of use, like a country club where there is a restaurant in there and serving, but it could also be something where there's no restaurant in there. They are not serving meals per se.
Yeah, just so my question was clear, I'm going to ask it one more time. Just because this location is in this dry pocket, as per the ABC definition, is not kicking in the fact that we have to do an ordinance and call it a club. Those are not two priorities that happen together. You could have the same situation someplace else, but it's not in the dry pocket.
That could be the case. The ordinance is a requirement by the state law. It has to be acted upon by the governing body, by the state law, because it is in that dry area. The verbiage to it is a little bit different, and that's where I say working through it, because it's in that dry area. It has to be acted upon separately by the governing body. An ordinance has to be passed.
But it's not because of the dry pocket.
It is because it's in a dry area.
So it's got it. So you have to have it.
If they're going to do alcohol sales,
you have to have it designated as a club because it's in the dry pocket area.
Not necessarily a club. For us, that's the definition of what the ABC. It's just like if they are in at one time in a city that does not have alcohol sales. It's 100% dry county. If a restaurant wants to come in and sell alcohol in that business, they made them a private club. And in the day, you had to come in and sign your name in, and you was part of that, private club to go in there. I don't know if they handle that exactly the same now, but that is the case for any dry area that is wanting to do alcohol sales in this type of avenue for a restaurant with alcohol sales. It has not changed. That is still a requirement. It has to be an ordinance passed by the city.
So it is dry. It is a dry area that they're wanting to do club and alcohol. Restaurant and alcohol sales.
Yes.
Has to be an ordinance that says it's a club. That's the two items that have to go together in order for us to do an ordinance about a club.
I will speak with the ABC attorney and our attorneys. The requirement that I understand from the law that it has to be passed, allowing for the sale of restaurant with the sale of alcohol at this place. Our standard C3 zoning, which does not suffice for the state law.
All right, Mayor, I'm sorry.
No problem. I think one of the things is there's clearly differences between the state and the city on this particular issue. Clearly, these type of companies can move forward from the state perspective, and I know it creates some confusion. I know one of the things, Director Phillips, did you want to make a comment on a particular suggestion? Just in your purview in dealing with things like this?
And what I was getting at earlier, what I'm understanding from Director Collins is, I mean, we can call it tomato and the ABC call it tomato, but long as we're saying the same thing, even if the labels are different, it'll be consistent enough for us to pass the ordinance for then the applicant to go to the ABC. That's how I was reading the write up, because it is in the dry pocket. That was my understanding, Director Collins. So that's all I was going to chime in and say, Mayor.
That's correct.
All right, thank you. I believe Director Hendricks, did you have a comment?
I was just concerned about the long dissertation, that's all.
Yes, ma'am. We'll now move to item number 11. Presentation item number 11.
Yeah, if you could bring up the zoning, please, first, and kind of show the general location. Director Wyrick, as you see, this is just west of University, north of 30. This has come before the board previously as a planned development. It was, at the time that it come before, it was for Rodney Cycle House, motorcycle sales service, trailer sales, several things that is in the uses, restaurant with bar, motorcycle auctions. It was more, and prior to that, I believe it was, if I'm wrong, a McCoy's lumber sales. And so it was a C4 zoning at the time for outdoor, exhibits of what is to be sold. And so what they're looking to do is to revise the PCD to be more in line with what the previous uses were, which is outdoor, exhibits of what to be sold. So if you, they're looking to come in, and so instead of being like outside, motorcycle sales, that type of aspect, they're looking to, they're going to use the existing steel building as their showroom and office, the service space. They want to use the existing pole barn structures to house equipment for staging and transport. They also want to utilize, to provide some of those outside visibility of their product for sales outside in there. So that essentially is what they're wanting to use it for. They want to keep, the existing signage on there. They want to update the working copy, for the new business that's going to be brought in. We were supportive of that change. It was not out of the normal use of that property, even previously when it was the McCoys through the motorcycle sales. There were no registered objectors to this. It was placed on consent agenda for the Planning Commission and was approved.
Okay, thank you.
Item number 12.
We could bring up for this one, the zoning. We'll probably give an overall picture of what this property is. This property is, it has come before the board before as a planned development. In the past, it had come, we're looking at about a little over 10 acres, nearly 11 acres of property. It come before the board back in 2001 for a independent living apartment development, 4 stories in height. At that time, they were looking to do 126 apartment units for that, along with 15 independent living villas along the east portion of the overall property. What this development is looking to do is to come in, rezone the property a standard R5 zoning, which would allow for a maximum units of 36 units per acre, which would give them, they could potentially do up to 420, but that is very rarely met because of landscaping requirements and parking requirements and our setback requirements for the city. The They also went to the Board of Adjustments previously in December because in this application, it was just a straight R5 zoning. The height did go to the Board of Adjustments for a variance request on the height. It was denied. The appeal timeframe has not lapsed, so potentially that could still be appealed. For that, this request is just for the straight zoning for the use. If you'll look just to the north and south of the property, it is a multi-family development on all sides of the property except for the little office development, which is at Presbyterian Village. Down there to the south, it is that R5 along Brookside going into office before it hits Rodney Parham. It is 03 to the north, but that multifamily, that is the property that is to the north. Some of the opposition that has come out, and there were opposition that come out, there were 14 that spoke against this development at the Planning Commission. There were more in attendance, so that number is higher. I'm sure the directors have received emails with the opposition that has been received. Some of the main points of the opposition of what they are concerned about is one was the ultimate height of the building, which was addressed at the Board of Adjustments. The other was just the intensity of development, the number of the units, which is not being proposed at this time on this development, but in the Board of Adjustment presentation, the applicant the developer did talk about being more in the lower 300 unit range for this tract of land. So the intensity mainly what they're talking about is the people that come were concerned about the traffic addition onto Rodney Parham. I do want to point out that in this zoning, for this one to be to go on after approval of zoning, it would have to meet safety concerns, and that has been brought up that at a minimum, an emergency access would be required on the north side to tie Brookside on that north side end that would eventually come out and tie on to just to the west. In the presentation of the Board of Adjustment, that full tie was also an option that was presented at that time by the applicant. A minimum secondary access would be needed. Full access would be preferred to the north. So some of that concern would be alleviated for traffic going on to Rodney Parham, but it also depends on which route people, if this development proceeds, how they leave, what would be done, and a traffic study would be required in order for that to happen. On the height, some of the opposition was the people that were coming out were more across to the east of the creek. Their concerns were the height of development as far as looking onto properties across the street and adjacent. So those were the concerns that were presented. And I'm sure that people have received emails of their concern and in opposition for this development.
Thanks, Jamie. And you're right. I've worked a lot with the neighborhood and met with the developer and the engineer and to try to come to some common ground. And I think that the main thing is the R5 designation really troubles the Eagle Crest and Leawood neighborhoods. I'd like for this item to be held separate.
Item 12 will be held separate. Director Adcock has a question.
Yes, Mr. Collins, we've received quite a few emails over the last day or two on this. Are most of the people who's in opposition to the right of the creek?
Yes, ma'am. That is the residential neighborhood that is across the creek. It does have some buffer area in it as far as width. It varies in width through there. It could be over 200. It could be a little bit less than 200 in width. And then also for vegetation, there are areas of that creek that there are higher vegetation amounts as opposed to other areas as closer you get to Rodney Parham, is where that kind of goes away a little bit. And also depends on the tree species. This time of year, there are several trees through that area, I'm sure, that has lost their leaves, but there's also some green. The developer has, when they were at the Planning Commission, also the Board of Directors or Board of Adjustments, they did talk about revegetation, putting some more vegetation or other types of screening up that would help with that aspect. Some of their concerns was just the lights of the development coming across that span of creek, and also just the height of development, people be able to look in. Now, we can't necessarily screen 4 stories of building, but as far as the lights go and other aspects of the parking areas of that, any development going onto that tract, that can be addressed during site plan review and building permitting.
Do you have a picture of the way the apartments are going to be on that leg that hangs down?
That is not part of the application. This is a straight rezone. Although I do believe that the applicant does have an idea of what they want to place on there, which may change based upon the denial of the Board of Adjustment for the height variance, because at this time, depends upon what the number of units they're looking at and the height of the building, the number of the buildings may change. That has not been presented to us at this time.
When would the Board of Adjustments vote on this?
Board of Adjustment has already voted. They voted in December. I can get you the exact date and also the minutes of that meeting.
If you would please ask the applicant, I would like to see his plans on that leg coming down, how close those apartments would be to those residents.
I will relay that to the applicant.
Okay, thank you. Mayor, I have a question on 14. I'd like to have a presentation, please.
Yes, ma'am. Before we get to that, Director Phillips had a question.
Yes, Director Collins, I saw in the write-up that the land use for the development, let me make sure I'm speaking correctly, is residential high density. And my question is, when was that land use designation made?
I'm thinking.
Okay.
I'll have to pull that up and get that to you. It has been on there for decades.
Okay.
That. And I want to, the people that have brought the people in opposition that has come out, we've stated that it is, the land use is residential high density, and it is set at 12 units per the acre, but that's where it starts. That's not necessarily what it could be and go to. It's 12 units per acre or more. That does not limit it to 12 units per dwelling units per acre. That is just the start of what we would consider residential high density on the land use plan. So if somebody comes in at 12, we would say, yes, that falls in the plan. If they come in at 20 units per acre, that falls in the plan. If they come in as the multifamily that is just to the north of them, which is multifamily at MF 24 at 24 units per the acre, we still would consider that adhering to the residential high density of the land use plan. It is more than 12 units per the acre.
Thank you.
Director Adcock, item number 14. Get a question? Would you like a presentation?
I'd like to have a presentation because I think that this, when it first came out, the neighborhood was told it was going to be 24 hours. I understand it's no longer a 24-hour daycare. So I would like to have all the facts from Mr. Collins of what this is.
Okay, I cannot explain to you whether it is a 24-hour child care facility or not. I'll have to get that from the applicant, get that sent back to you. If we could bring up the zoning map. This is a couple tracts of land that is owned by the city that is south of the interstate on Jonesboro Drive. Right now, all the properties are zoned R3, single family. What we're presenting this is to go to more of a O1 or a quiet office use for the future facility that is to be there. We did send notifications out within 200 feet, and also the Oak Forest and Forest Hill neighborhood associations were notified for that. And so, as you can see from there, just to the north is the library that's through there, and then just to the west is also what we have considered in the past open space for parks. So that Jonesboro Drive area is an area that the city has been looking at for several years of trying to build some connectivity across the interstate and also put uses on the south side of the interstate along that Jonesboro Drive that would complement the area for both sides of the interstate. At the presentation, there was no individuals present registering in support or not supporting the application. It was on consent approval at the Planning Commission.
Thank you so much for your comments, Director Collins. We'll now transition to separate items for items 15 through 18. Any questions on items 15 through 18?
Item 16.
Item 16, Director Collins, if you would give us an update.
Mr. Collins?
Yes,
When this was before us, before I asked for it to be postponed to this date, and the reason was that the neighborhoods that you sent your notification to, one of them no longer is meeting. The second one, the president had open heart surgery. And could you tell us now on the second time who notices went out to, please?
Yes, I can. We sent out notifications to Legionette Neighborhood Association, Allendale. I can send you the list of all the neighborhood associations we sent.
Or maybe this would be easier to use.
We sent to the 20 of them, and then we have a list of individuals that the applicant sent the notifications to, certified, that I can send that also to the board. They also have a concern that you raised was also the placard, the timing of placards. It has been reposted on the property 3 separate times since then. And so I have the time frames and the pictures to show for that. And so I do have documentation showing all of that. What I can also give you and let you know is that the applicant is meeting with, and I forgot which neighborhood association Mr. Mann is associated with, but they will be meeting the day before the board meeting is, I believe, the scheduled date of that meeting. So we will endeavor at that time to find out the outcome of that meeting. I do know that a concern that was raised by Mr. Mann, which will probably be out of that meeting, is that this property, they would like to see something more in the line of a grocery store use of that property. I do not know if that's the highest and best use of this property for that location, but that is just something that I know that has been spoken, that has come by our desk of what they would like to see.
Can you have Mr. Honeywell or one of his staff check the back of that property, because it goes right into a ditch, which is the drainage off of Hyman Park? And I would like to know if filling in that ditch for this development is going to cause some more flooding in Hyman Park.
So we will verify that and send it out. We did look at this originally at the last time meeting at the board when you requested for referral of how that site graded. There is a portion, a very small portion of the site potentially that is on the northwest corner that depends on how they survey it, could potentially be in the floodplain aspect of it. But there's 2 areas that drain off the site that go to that rear ditch that you're talking about. That goes into the park. So we will take some pictures of that and kind of show the location. So that
I would like to have that in writing, please, so I can look at it.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other questions from items 15 through 18? No other questions for items 15 through 18? Before we conclude,
Director Hendricks.
I'm sorry.
On resolution 18, that has to do, I think this was presented by Director Wright and also Richardson, and I understand that a new director will be supporting this. And I don't want to make this appear to the majority voters, directors, that is some division. It's no division between us. It's just that I don't opt for anything, and particularly when a resolution doesn't have funding. But I'm going to work with, at the request of attorney, I will be supporting 18. That's resolution 18. And I would also ask that Mr. Moore would remove our names. Why do our names have to be on this? And that's one of the reasons why I did not agree. I don't like to showcase. I want what we're doing equal to what other board members are doing. My name does not have to appear on that board resolution. Take it off. In fact, take all of the names off. Thank you. And that's to Mr. Moore. Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you, Director Hendricks.
And understand.
Her request is to remove the names of the directors of the sponsoring. That was what she requested.
That's not typically. Okay.
Thank you, Director Hendricks. Thank you, Mr. Moore.
Mayor, the directors that sponsor a resolution have the right to have their names on it by ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney. Are there any questions from board members or comments before we conclude?
Mayor, we do have a thing here on the scooters. Is it going to be on the agenda, or was this just for information?
It will be on the agenda. It's being passed out today for your review, and should have an email that has been sent to, or Mr. Moore, has the email been sent? The email has been sent to the board members who could not make it in person. And so for your review, those are changes that have been made in a best effort and a balanced approach to take heed to what is possible and feasible within the confines of state law in regards to scooter ordinances. So this is a rewrite, and we think this is the best effort to get all that accomplished, or otherwise it would have to be the way it is now. And what needs to be accomplished is to receive revenue for something that's in our city right now, but also keep it as safe as possible within the confines that we can have safety included.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Adcock. Any other questions? Who? Director Richardson, did you? Hendricks, Director?
No, sir.
Director Hendricks?
No, I'm finished.
Okay, thank you. Before we conclude, I think one of the things I wanted to reiterate, we shared this in 2019. And clearly, 2020 has been just a challenging year in navigation of different things. We've gone to basically 50-50 remote in person in regards to our agenda and board of directors meeting. But wanted to reiterate that we do have rules of decorum. They are placed on our agenda meeting for the public that come to our meetings in person. They're also online as well. Clearly, particularly our last board meeting, there was some extreme usage of profanity. And so we want to reiterate to the board that there is a rules of decorum that states different factors when things, there are rules of decorum that states different factors of things that happen after if a person is out of compliance with our rules of decorum for the meeting. So I'll just reiterate one. So this is just more of just a public setting to make sure that we reiterate for the 2021 year what we've already done in 2019. Clearly 2020 was challenging, so just in case that things may have been forgotten, we want to re-jog the memory and have a public statement about it. And so one of the things of our rules of decorum is the use of profanity or engaging in a verbal personal attack on the mayor, a member of the board of directors, any city employees, or any person during citizens communication or during comments on an agenda item is unacceptable and will not be tolerated. The presiding officer shall determine if a violation has occurred. Any such action shall result in a ban from attendance at meetings of the board of directors and the right to speak at citizens communication. or on an agenda item for a period of up to 3 months. If such actions occurs after an individual has been barred once, then the period of time to block attendance at a meeting or to speak may be up for up to 1 year. This period includes the inability to speak at any meeting where public comments are allowed. So just wanted to reiterate that specifically on the profanity usage. And of course, the presiding officer will determine that violation and work to carry out those bans. Wanted to share that.
Could we have that in writing, please?
Yes, ma'am. It's on our agenda, but we'll get that to you in writing.
Thank you.
Yes, Director Margaret.
Yeah. I don't know if it's just me, but I have trouble hearing the other board members as they're speaking. Those that are on the screen that are doing video, and then those that are in the room. So if we can do some adjustments, I don't know if it's anybody else can hear or not, but you know, I'd like to hear the full dialogue of others that are speaking, both here and on the video. So if we can do something to adjust that, it may just be us talking into the microphone better. Maybe that would be helpful, but I wonder if our people at home can hear any better than what we can hear. So I just offer that as a suggestion to try to improve that.
And Mr. Moore, could we work on that? Thank you. Director, Vice Mayor Hines.
I might suggest the folks working from home, I know when I've done Zoom calls, sometimes it's easier to put an earbud in with a microphone or a headset with the microphone. It gets it closer to your face. I think the issue we're having is with the microphones on the iPads. They're either not close enough to, and maybe we could provide them with some headsets that they could use.
And that's what we'll do. We'll have our IT folks follow up with with everybody that might want them in case you're at home. And I think the headsets will work a little better. Those little things in your ear are a little irritating, but we'll follow up on that.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Any more questions? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned.